The scent of cheap stationery and old wood flooded my senses, a brutal, welcome anchor to reality. I was here. I was alive. Not in that cold hospital room, my life bleeding out on sterile sheets while the ghost of my child's cry echoed in a silence I could no longer hear. I was here in my old bedroom on the morning my first life ended and my second foolish one began. On the desk before me lay two documents, a letter of introduction from my father's office and a marriage application form, both bearing the name Leo Vance. The sight of it, his name paired with mine, Elara Reed, sent a jolt of pure venom through my veins. My fingers, trembling not with shy anticipation but with a decade of condensed fury, snatched the papers. I didn't hesitate. A match from the porcelain dish on my dresser flared to life with a sharp crackle. I touched the flame to the corner of the marriage application, watching the fire greedily consume Leo's neatly printed name, then mine. The letter of introduction followed. The orange glow danced, painting shadows that told stories of humiliation. His mother's sneer, his sister's greedy fingers on my mother's jade bracelet, the empty space in the bed where a husband should have been. A knock at the door, sharp and expected, cut through the crackle. Panic, cold and slick, was instantly overridden by a glacial calm. Father's voice echoed in my mind, "In crisis, Elara, be still water. Let them see only the placid surface." The papers were only half ash. I grabbed the ceramic bowl meant for potpourri, dumped the burning remains into it and slammed the lid from my teapot on top. A wisp of rebellious smoke curled up. I swept my hand through it, scattering the gray tendrils, and coughed deliberately. "Who is it?" My voice emerged steady, a minor miracle. "Elara. It's Leo." That voice. A baritone that had once made my foolish heart flutter. Now it was the sound of a tomb sealing shut. 10 years in my past life hadn't been enough to warm its inherent coldness. This time I wouldn't waste a single breath trying. Hatred, I discovered, when it reaches its absolute limit, doesn't boil. It freezes into a diamond-hard clarity. I took a deep breath, willing the tremor out of my limbs. My father, Marcus Reed, had sacrificed everything for his country, and his final act of worry had been to secure my future with the man he thought I loved. He'd humbled himself before Leo's family, promised leverage for a promotion, and extracted a promise that Leo would care for me. He'd transferred everything, this apartment, his savings, to me, his only child. Then he'd left for a coastal intelligence post, a mission from which he never returned. He'd been wrong. And I, like an idiot, had been complicit. In my first life, I'd opened this door with a bride's hopeful blush. Today I opened it with the solemnity of a soldier facing a known enemy. Leo Vance stood in the hallway, his uniform crisp, his smile a practiced curve of lips that never quite reached his eyes. He was handsome in a severe way, all sharp angles and calculated charm. "Elara," he said, the soft tone a lie I could now decipher. "Let's go. The registry office is waiting." I didn't step back to let him in. I filled the doorway, my body a barrier. "Aren't you due back at your garrison tonight? We should wait until your duties are settled." The words were placid, still water. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes flickered. "The paperwork is the priority. Once it's done, I can focus on my command. Always the career. My father's promised promotion. The unspoken transaction hung in the air. Military marriages required approvals, reports. The letter I'd just burned was crucial. How long would it take him to get another? He mistook my silence for maidenly hesitation. He reached out as if to tuck a stray hair behind my ear. I flinched back, a visceral reaction I couldn't suppress. We stood frozen, my recoil a silent scream in the space between us. His hand hung in the air, then slowly lowered. I forced a thin, pale smile. "We're not married yet, Leo. People will talk." He chuckled, a low sound that scraped against my nerves. "After today you'll be my wife. Will you still shy away then?" The gentle teasing was a mask, one I'd once found romantic. Now it made my skin prickle as if insects crawled beneath it. I lifted my gaze and met his eyes directly. The still water evaporated. "I'm not going to register with you." The change in his face was minute but profound. The pleasant mask solidified into something colder. His brows drew together. "What did you say?" "My name is Elara Reed. You can address me as Comrade Reed," I said, my voice clear and firm in the quiet hallway. "Mr. Vance, my father was mistaken to ask you to marry someone you feel nothing for." But if you had any genuine regard, you wouldn't have waited until the final day to do this. I've made my decision. I don't force others and I won't force myself. A marriage built on a business arrangement is one I want no part of. I saw the calculations flash behind his eyes. The lost promotion, the wasted negotiations with my father, the sudden, inexplicable collapse of his carefully laid plan. His smile vanished entirely. "Elara," he said, his voice dropping, laced with a warning. "Are you truly refusing me?" The arrogance of the question almost made me laugh. Who did he think he was? I had my father's name, my education, this apartment. I had inherited my mother's striking features. Marrying me had always been a social step up for him. I said, straightening my spine. "Since we won't be marrying, you can consider the promotion my father discussed withdrawn. It wouldn't look right for a rising officer to be seen trading his future for a wife, would it?" His composure cracked. His expression cycled through shock, anger, and a swift, tactical reassessment. "So that's it," he said coldly. "You think I'm a careerist? I requested that post, yes, but it was to build a better life for us. I'm a soldier, Elara. My leaves are scarce. How are we to build a relationship? Your father offered a recommendation. My record would have done the rest. If you're refusing me over this, it's petty. In my past life, those lies would have woven around my heart. Now they were just words, empty and brittle." I looked at him, this stranger I had loved and suffered for, and felt nothing but a clean, sharp disdain. "Comrade Vance," I said, finality ringing in the title. "My father acted on a misunderstanding. The truth is I do not love you. I will not marry you. Your future partner is out there somewhere. It isn't me." I moved to close the door. His hand shot out, gripping the frame, his knuckles white. For a terrifying second, the polite officer vanished and I saw the ruthless man beneath. I met his gaze unflinchingly, my weariness of him a tangible shield. His expression hardened, then smoothed back into that false gentleness. "Comrade Reed," he said, the words careful. "Is there a misunderstanding? We should talk it out. Did someone say something to you? About me and Clara? Clara Bell and I are just childhood friends." Clara. He'd said the name. The woman next door. The one he'd always loved. The memory of my past life deathbed. The gossip from a nurse about Commander Vance finally marrying his sweetheart Clara after his inconvenient first wife passed crashed over me. "The only person I've been listening to is myself, Comrade Vance," I replied, my voice icy. "I don't love you. My father made an error. I considered honoring his wish, but I cannot. I will not spend my life with a man I don't love. That's all you need to understand." I pried his fingers off the doorframe one by one. The resistance in them spoke of fury, of a plan unraveling. "Goodbye, Leo." I shut the door. The solid click of the lock was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I leaned against the wood, my heart hammering not with fear, but with a savage, triumphant joy. I had done it. I had broken the first link in the chain. But as my eyes adjusted to the dim room, they fell on the ceramic bowl. The lid was slightly askew. I walked over, lifted it, and my blood ran cold. The ashes were there. But the partially burned corner of the marriage introduction letter, the part with the official stamp and serial number, was gone. Leo hadn't just been pleading at the door. He'd been stealing insurance. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. I watched from the window, hidden by the thin gauze curtain, as Leo Vance strode down the sun-dappled sidewalk. His back was rigid, his steps too quick, a soldier in retreat from an unexpected defeat. The triumph that had surged through me moments before curdled into something sharper, more vigilant. He wasn't a man who accepted loss. My gaze snapped back to the ceramic bowl. The absence of that crucial paper fragment was a hole in my new reality, a piece of the old life's poison left to fester. He had it. He'd stooped to literal theft. Why? To force the registration? To use the serial number to pressure the authorities? To prove some twisted point of commitment? It didn't matter. Its absence was a threat. I couldn't stay here. He knew where I lived. He had a key, a fact from my past life I'd forgotten until this moment. My father, in his misguided trust, had given him one for emergencies. My sanctuary was compromised. Action was the only antidote to the dread creeping up my spine. I dressed swiftly in simple trousers and a sturdy shirt, my hands moving with an efficiency born of necessity. I packed a single bag. Practical clothes, my mother's small jewelry case, hidden at the bottom of my stocking drawer, thankfully untouched, my identification papers and the savings book from my father. I slid a sharp kitchen knife into the outer pocket, its weight both terrifying and reassuring. But before I could flee, I needed to see my father. Leo wouldn't know where to find him today. His departure for the Coastal Intelligence Post was a closely held secret. I had a narrow window. The government district was a world of austere granite and purposeful silence. I found the unmarked building, gave my name to the stern guard, and was shown into a small sunlit office that smelled of old paper and lemon polish. My father, Marcus Reed, stood by a filing cabinet, his profile familiar and achingly dear. He looked older than I remembered, or perhaps I was just seeing him with the eyes of someone who had mourned him for a decade. He turned and a warm, weary smile lit his face. "Alara. Back so soon? I thought you'd be at the registry." His eyes darted past me to the empty hallway, and the smile faded, replaced by gentle concern. "Where's Leo?" The directness of his love undid me for a second. I crossed the room and took his arm, guiding him to a chair. "I didn't register with him, Dad." He blinked, truly puzzled. "But he's the one you admired. You talked of little else last spring." I had. I cringed at the memory of my past self's starry-eyed chatter. "I was a fool, blinded by a uniform," I said, my voice low but steady. "Dad, listen. A marriage shouldn't be a safety net you weave for me. You've always taught me that a person's only real security is what they build themselves. Otherwise, the mountain you lean on will crumble and the people you depend on will walk away." I led him out of the office, away from possible eavesdroppers, to a small, quiet tea house a few streets over. Over steaming cups of jasmine tea, I laid out my new plan. "Leo and I, we have no common foundation. No shared spirit. You saw a decent soldier and I saw a handsome face. But his kind of decency isn't a companion for an eagle, Dad. It's a barnacle. If I tie myself to him, I'll only drown." I took a deep breath, voicing the conviction that had solidified in my soul. "So, instead of using your influence to get him promoted, use it to help me find a proper job. A real position. If my work is stable, I can stand on my own. I'll meet capable people in time. And you can focus on serving the country without this weight on your heart." My father listened, his keen eyes studying my face. Slowly, a profound, relieved smile spread across his features, erasing the lines of worry. "You've grown up, little sparrow," he said, his voice thick. I thought I was raising a lovesick songbird. I knew Leo Vance wasn't the right match. His ambition, it's a cold thing. But you seemed so set on him. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you found your sight before it was too late." My eyes stung. He had known. He had seen the truth and had still been willing to walk into the lion's den for my happiness. "You prepared a backup plan," I stated, seeing it in his expression. "Of course. A father always has a plan B for his daughter," he said, a glint of his old humor returning. "I've already spoken to Arthur Lennox. You start at the Central Resource Coordination Office tomorrow. He's promised a good mentor. You'll arrange your own life and I will do my job and come back to you as soon as I can. That's a promise." "Thank you, Dad." The words were inadequate, but they were all I had. His expression grew serious again. "As for Comrade Vance, since you're not marrying him, my support is naturally withdrawn. But be careful, Alara. The man is tenacious. He won't give up that promotion easily. He may cause trouble." His warning settled in my stomach like a stone. We finished our tea and he walked me to the entrance of the tea house. "Go straight to the dormitory they've arranged. Don't go home. I'll have someone check on you." We embraced, a fierce, wordless communication passing between us. I watched him walk back toward the granite building, his figure straight and resolute, and sent a silent vow into the universe. "This time you will come home." Following his instruction, I went directly to the address he'd given me, a women's dormitory attached to a minor ministry complex. It was plain but clean, and the matron assigned me a sparse room on the 3rd floor. I stowed my bag, but a restless energy gnawed at me. The stolen document fragment was a loose thread, and I needed to see if anything else was missing. Waiting until full dark, I slipped out and made my way back to my apartment. The streets were quiet. My key turned in the lock with a sound that seemed too loud. The familiar space felt alien, violated. I checked everything. The jewelry was safe. The savings book untouched. Nothing was gone except that charred corner of paper. He knows I know, I thought. It was a message. A claim. I was double-checking the window locks when a knock echoed through the quiet apartment. Not a polite tap but a firm, authoritative rap. My blood turned to ice. My hand went to the knife in my bag but it felt pathetic, a toy against a trained soldier's strength. Calling for help. The neighbors were distant, and Leo could easily explain it as a lover's quarrel. My mind raced towards grim, final outcomes. Alara Reed? Open up, please. The voice was unfamiliar. Male, calm but carrying an unarguable weight of authority. It wasn't Leo. Cautiously I peered through the peephole. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a well-cut but civilian suit. His posture was relaxed yet alert, and his face, sharply handsome in the dim hall light, held a look of mild impatience. "Who is it?" I called, my voice tight. "Cale Lennox. My father, Arthur, sent me. He's worried about you being here alone." Arthur Lennox. My father's friend. My new boss. The relief was so sudden it made my knees weak. I fumbled with the chain and opened the door. Cale Lennox looked me up and down, his gaze assessing but not unkind. He had his father's strong jaw and intense eyes, but where Arthur's were warm, Cale's were a cool, observant gray. "Have you finished packing?" he asked, as if this midnight relocation was the most mundane errand. "My father got a call from Marcus. He was concerned after what happened with Vance. Told me to bring you to the ministry dorm tonight." Apparently I drew the short straw. His tone was dry, slightly put upon, the son of an influential man tasked with babysitting. But when his eyes caught mine properly, something shifted. He saw the lingering fear I couldn't fully hide, the tension in my shoulders. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Grab your things. The car's downstairs." I'm already packed," I managed, hoisting my bag. "Thank you, Comrade Lennox. I'm sorry for the trouble." "No trouble," he grunted, though his earlier comment belied it. He took my bag from me with an easy motion. "But I haven't eaten. You know if anything's still open." It was past 11. The state-run canteens were closed. "There's a private noodle stall near the market. It might still have a fire going." "Lead the way," he said. "And it's my treat. Consider it a welcome to the ministry." "No, I'll buy," I insisted, feeling the need to assert some control, to not be a complete charity case. "It's the least I can do." He gave me a look that suggested he wasn't used to being argued with, but shrugged. "Suit yourself." The night air was cool. The noodle stall was indeed open, a single bulb illuminating the steam rising from a giant pot. We sat on rickety stools and I ordered 2 bowls of beef noodle soup. The simple, fragrant meal in the quiet, shadowed street felt surreal. We were halfway through, the warmth of the broth settling my nerves, when a familiar, grating voice cut through the night. "Well, look who it is. If it isn't my almost sister-in-law." I looked up. Leo stood a few feet away, and beside him, smirking, was his sister, Leona Vance. Her eyes, sharp with malice, darted from me to Cale and back again. "Alara," Leo said, his voice dangerously calm. His gaze was fixed on Cale, scrutinizing him with the intensity of a rival predator. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" The warmth of the noodle soup turned to ash in my mouth. Leo's presence was a cold draft in the humid night air. Leona's smirk was a spark to the tinder of my rage. I placed my chopsticks down carefully, the click on the porcelain bowl a tiny declaration of war. Cale, beside me, didn't look up immediately. He took a final, deliberate sip of his broth, then set his bowl down with a calm that felt like a wall being erected. He finally turned his head, his cool gray eyes sweeping over Leo with an impersonal assessment that was somehow more insulting than open hostility. "Don't spew nonsense, Leona," I said, my voice flat and hard. "I am not your sister-in-law. My relationship with anyone is none of your family's business. Comrade Vance and I have concluded our discussions. I'm not going to marry him. He should be receiving formal notice shortly. My father has made other arrangements." Leo's face darkened. He took a step forward, his bulk blocking the light from the stall's bulb. "Is it because of him?" he demanded, jerking his chin toward Cale. The possessive anger in his tone was a relic of a future that would never be. Heat, pure and furious, rose in my chest. This man, after scheming for my father's influence, after stealing from my home, Dared to play the jealous fool? The words erupted before I could temper them. Yes. I like Comrade Lennox. I like gentlemen. Men with good families, good character who are actually suited to me. I've told you clearly, Leo. Don't love. And if you sneak into my apartment again, I'll report you to the Public Security Bureau. I saw it. A flicker of genuine alarm in his eyes at the mention of his trespass. In this era without cameras, my threat was a bluff, but he couldn't be sure what I'd seen or what proof I might have fabricated. The power shift was minute, but I felt it. He recovered quickly, shifting tactics. I was frantic when you didn't meet me, he said, his voice dropping into a coaxing, wounded register that once would have melted me. I've already refiled the marriage report with my unit, taken emergency leave. I thought we could talk, get to know each other properly. I even submitted our relationship papers to the political officer. The audacity stole my breath. He'd officially tied my name to his within the military bureaucracy, creating a paper trail, a fact. It was a trap, an attempt to make disentanglement messy and public. Are you insane? I hissed, my composure cracking. Comrade Vance, I told you I don't like you. The one I like is Comrade Lennox. Look at yourself. How could you possibly be worthy of me? It was brutally blunt, the kind of thing my past life self, desperate for his affection, would have never dared say. Liana Vance, a viper in a cheap dress, lunged forward then, her hand flying toward my face. You conceited little. Her wrist was caught in midair, not by me but by Cale. He hadn't moved from his stool, but his arm had shot out with startling speed. His grip didn't look tight, but Liana froze, her angry flush draining to pallor as she met his gaze. Comrade, Cale said, his voice low and utterly devoid of emotion. Striking a citizen is a crime. I suggest you reconsider. He released her. Liana stumbled back a step, cowering behind her brother's shoulder. All her bravado evaporated. In my past life she'd been the petty tyrant of the household, jealous of my job, my belongings, my very existence. Now faced with real quiet authority, she shriveled. Leo's jaw worked. He was a soldier, but Cale, in his civilian suit, exuded a different kind of power, the unshakable confidence of deep-rooted influence. Leo was several centimeters shorter, and standing now, the difference in their presence was palpable. Cale was a mountain, Leo merely a stubborn rock at its base. My refusal has nothing to do with Comrade Lennox, I stated, reclaiming the narrative. Comrade Vance, I simply do not like you. And Liana, you will watch your tongue. If you keep slandering me, it won't just be my father withdrawing support. I can ensure that promotion your brother dreams of vanishes permanently. Do you understand? I was playing a dangerous game, threatening with an influence I didn't yet fully possess. But I saw the effect. The avaricious glint in Liana's eyes dimmed with fear for her own prospects. Leo's expression was a storm of humiliation and fury, but beneath it, the cold calculation returned. He couldn't risk it. Not yet. We're leaving, Leo bit out, grabbing his sister's arm. He shot me one last burning look, a promise of unfinished business, and they melted back into the shadows of the night market. The silence they left behind was ringing. My hands were trembling. I clasped them together in my lap. Cale finally stood, tossing a few coins onto the stall counter. Come on, he said, his tone back to that of a mildly inconvenienced escort. We walked in silence to a parked, unmarked sedan. Only when the engine purred to life and the familiar streets began to slide past did I find my voice. It was small in the dark interior of the car. Comrade Lennox, I'm sorry. What I said back there, about liking you, I was just trying to make him back off. I didn't mean to drag you into my mess. I stared at my knuckles, white in the gloom. I'd used him as a shield without his consent, potentially damaging his reputation. For a long moment he said nothing. Then a soft, unexpected sound. A low chuckle. I thought you really meant it for a second there, he said, a thread of amusement in his voice. Got my hopes up. Comrade Reed, you're clearly a woman of decisive action. I'm sure you have admirers lined up already. The tension broke, leaving me flustered. It's the last thing I want right now, I murmured. What do you want? He asked, the question casual but pointed. To do my job. To not bring shame on my father. To make Leo Vance disappear from my life. He nodded slowly as if filing the information away. He drove me to the ministry dormitory, spoke briefly with the night matron, and saw me to the door of my assigned room. Be at the Central Resource Office, 3rd floor at 8 tomorrow. Don't be late. The next morning, nerves buzzing, I found the office. It was a large, bright room full of filing cabinets, maps, and the steady clatter of typewriters. Before I could find someone to report to, a familiar figure emerged from a side office. Cale Lennox. He was in a crisp, official tunic today, and he looked every inch the senior administrator. He held a file, my file. "Elara Reed," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. Several colleagues glanced up. "I've read your dossier. I'll be the mentor assigned to you. You'll intern directly under me. Work seriously, or you won't pass your probationary period." His tone was all business, devoid of last night's dry humor. I nodded, my spine straightening. "I understand, Comrade Lennox. I will work hard." A man at a nearby desk, older with kind eyes, grinned. "Don't scare the girl off on her first day, Cale. He just graduated. You, a bachelor pushing 30, should be showing some warmth." I felt a blush creep up my neck. Cale ignored the jab, but a corner of his mouth twitched. "Your desk is there," he said, pointing to a small, clean one near his office door. "Start by cataloging the incoming regional agricultural yield reports from the last quarter. Cross-reference them with the seed allocation logs. I want discrepancies flagged by noon." It was meticulous, demanding work. Exactly what I needed. I buried myself in columns of numbers and dry reports, the rhythm of it soothing the chaos in my mind. Cale was a strict but fair taskmaster, correcting errors with crisp precision, offering no praise but expecting perfection. For a week it was my sanctuary. Leo was reportedly recalled to his garrison abruptly, his leave cut short. I allowed myself to believe the storm had passed. I was wrong. The trouble arrived in the form of Liana Vance, loitering outside the ministry gates during my lunch break, then during my evening departure. She always had an excuse. I was just in the area. I wanted to talk about my brother. But her eyes were forever scanning behind me, searching for a glimpse of Cale. Then one afternoon a more formidable opponent appeared. As I walked home, a figure stepped from a doorway blocking my path. It was Leo's mother, Helena Vance. In her hands was a covered ceramic pot, steam wafting from its edges. She wore the saccharine smile of a benevolent dictator. "Elara dear, I heard my Leo has been foolish, upsetting you." Her voice was cloying. "Auntie made your favorite, sweet and sour pork tenderloin. Do you know how hard it is to get good tenderloin these days? Come eat and let's talk. All misunderstandings can be cleared over a good meal." The smell, once associated with rare family treats in my past life, now turned my stomach. I remembered the leftovers she'd fed me when I was pregnant and bedridden, the lectures about how she'd worked in the fields until her water broke. I looked at her expectant face, at the performative kindness, and felt only a cold, clear revulsion. "I am not close to your son, Mrs. Vance," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "And I don't care for sweet and sour. Since the meat is so precious, you should keep it for your own family. Please don't come here again. It's over. If you have time to spare, why not take this to Clara Bell? Perhaps you can help them find a happy ending." The name was a needle. Helena Vance's smile shattered, replaced by a flash of venomous recognition. "Clara Bell," she spat. "That little vixen. I knew she had her claws in him." Her motherly facade reassembled instantly, tighter and more desperate. "Don't you worry, dear. You're the only daughter-in-law I want. Auntie will sort this out. That homewrecker won't trouble you again." She bustled away, mission redirected. I watched her go, a cold smile touching my lips. The show, as I had predicted, was finally beginning. I had thrown a stone into the stagnant pond of the Vance family, and now the ugly creatures beneath were starting to stir. Helena Vance was a woman of formidable, if misguided, energy. My mention of Clara Bell was like tossing a lit match into a pool of kerosene. She didn't just simmer, she exploded into action, her indignation a perfect weapon I had handed her. I learned the details in bits and pieces, through the ministry gossip mill and a few discreet inquiries of my own. Helena, armed with a mother's righteous fury and a bully's instincts, didn't go to Clara's home. She went to Clara's workplace, the textile factory where Clara worked as a temporary clerk. She made a scene in the lobby, loud enough for supervisors and party representatives to hear, accusing Clara Bell of being a morally loose element, who was seducing a committed soldier and breaking up a state-arranged marriage. An inquiry was launched. In my past life, Clara had been clever and careful, her relationship with Leo a whispered secret sustained by his promises and her patience. But here, under the sudden harsh light of official scrutiny, other truths wriggled to the surface. The investigation found no conclusive evidence with Leo, but it did uncover Clara's ongoing entanglement with the factory's married deputy director. A relationship of improper convenience, the report stated. The consequences were swift and brutal. Clara, a temporary worker with no powerful family to shield her, was dismissed immediately. The deputy director was demoted and transferred to a remote forestry station. The neighborhood whispers began, sharp and condemning. Clara Bell was branded, her reputation in tatters. She wrote to Leo, of course. Desperate letters pleading for him to take responsibility, to stand by her now that their secret was exposed and she had nothing left. Leo, recalled to his garrison and facing the sudden collapse of his planned future with me, was in a volatile state. According to the scuttlebutt that eventually trickled back to the ministry, he did something recklessly brave, or suicidally stupid, during a live-fire training exercise on the coast. He threw himself on a misfired explosive device to shield his squad. He didn't die. But the cost was a left arm amputated at the elbow and a right leg shattered beyond repair. The news arrived a month after I'd started my job. I felt no satisfaction, only a hollow, cold sense of inevitability. The universe had enacted a brutal form of karma, but it brought me no pleasure. Then one afternoon as I was leaving work, he was there. Or rather, it was there. A figure in a wheelchair, parked under the bare branches of a plane tree outside the ministry gates. Leo Vance. He was gaunt, his uniform tunic hanging loosely on a frame that seemed to have collapsed in on itself. In his one remaining hand he held a small red paper bag. "Ilara," he said, his voice a rough echo of its former command. I stopped, my files clutched to my chest like a shield. I said nothing. He pushed the wheelchair forward with a clumsy, jerking motion of his good arm. "Wedding candies," he said, offering the bag. His smile was a ghastly parody. "Claire and we married last week. A quiet affair." I didn't take the bag. I looked at his face, at the defeat etched into every new line, at the bitter emptiness in his eyes. There was none of the arrogant swagger of the war hero he'd become in my first life. This was a broken man who had gambled for everything and lost it all. The promotion, his health, the woman he'd supposedly loved, who had only married him, I knew, because she had nowhere else to go, and the woman he'd planned to use. "Why, Ilara?" he asked, the question ripped from him. "Why did we end up here?" The simplicity of it almost made me laugh. "We were never on the same path, Leo," I said, my voice calm, the still water my father had taught me to be. "No matter which turns we took, our destinations were never the same." "Tell me the truth," he pressed, his single hand gripping the wheel of his chair. "Why did you refuse me that day? Was it really just a lack of feeling?" I looked at him, this ghost from my nightmare, and for the first time, I let a sliver of the truth out. Not the whole, impossible truth, but a version of it he could almost believe. "I had a dream," I said, the words slow and deliberate. "A vivid, terrible dream. In it we married. You left the day we registered. Your mother, your sister, they took my home, my mother's jewelry. They fed me scraps and scorn. I had a child and I died alone, knowing you were finally free to be with Clara. Felt so real, Leo. Felt like a warning. And I decided I would not walk into that future. I would not let your family torture me to death. Is that reason enough for you?" His face went ashen. He didn't speak. He just stared at me, and in his eyes I didn't see denial. I saw a horrible, dawning recognition. A recognition that the man he was, the family he came from, were capable of exactly that. The ugliness he'd always compartmentalized was laid bare by my dream. "I see," he whispered, the words barely audible. "So that's how it is." He turned his chair with a painful effort and began to wheel himself away, a man fleeing the ghost of his own potential for cruelty. I looked down at the red bag of candies he'd left on the ground. With the tip of my shoe I nudged it into the gutter. An old street sweeper, his broom rasping on the pavement, tooted loudly. "Comrade, have some civic virtue. Don't litter." Flushing, I bent and picked up the soggy bag, depositing it properly in a nearby iron trash bin. The old man mumbled about wasteful youth, his words following me as I hurried away, my heart a confused tumult of relief and residual anger. Work became my anchor. I earned my permanent position, my diligence impressing even Cale's exacting standards. He began giving me more independent assignments, his hovering supervision easing. I was building something, a fragile but real foundation. But trouble in the form of Liana Vance had a stubborn half-life. She hadn't given up her fixation on Cale. She began appearing more frequently, always dressed in her best, always with a flimsy excuse. It was becoming a nuisance. One afternoon Cale emerged from his office, a rare, frustrated pinch to his brow. He came straight to my desk. "Elara, I need your help with a street-level emergency." "What emergency?" I asked, looking up from a logistics report. "The persistent kind. Outside. Now." He didn't wait for an answer, simply turned and walked out. Intrigued and wary I followed. Liana was there by the main gate, clutching a bunch of wilting chrysanthemums. When she saw Cale, her face lit up with a simpering smile. The moment she saw me behind him, it twisted into a scowl. "What are you doing here?" she snapped at me. "I just wanted to see Comrade Lennox." "And why are you looking for my boyfriend?" I shot back, the lie coming effortlessly. I was tired of her, tired of the Vances, tired of the past clinging to my heels. Her eyes bulged. "Boyfriend? Since when?" "That was just a story you told my brother." "From the beginning," I stated calmly, stepping slightly closer to Cale, who stood silently, an impassive observer. "When I broke things off with Leo, I made my preference very clear. Don't pretend you don't know. You're lying. You're just using him. I'm the one who likes him." Her voice rose, attracting glances from people passing through the gate. I felt a reckless, liberating anger. I knew what she was doing, trying to create a public fact through sheer, shameless persistence. Two could play that game, and I was a far better actress forged in a harder school. I let a smug, possessive smile curve my lips. "So you like him?" "The problem is, Comrade Lennox doesn't want your affection. He wants mine. My love isn't just words, Liana. I buy him gifts. A good watch. A new bicycle. I leaned forward, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial, carrying whisper, bought his underwear. Do you think he'd prefer your wilted flowers? Love without substance is just cheap sentiment. And Comrade Lennox and I don't do cheap." The effect was electric. Liana's face turned purple with rage and humiliation. You're vile," she shrieked. Around us, a small crowd had gathered, colleagues on their way home, intrigued by the drama. I saw smiles, raised eyebrows. Then a voice called out from the crowd, a man from the procurement department. "Ah, congratulations, Comrade Lennox. Comrade Reed. So the rumors are true." Another voice chimed in. I wondered why our stone-faced Comrade Lennox was so eager to mentor a new trainee. Training his future wife was he. A brilliant match. The daughter of Marcus Reed and the son of Arthur Lennox. A perfect pairing of talent and family. My cheeks burned. I had been so focused on destroying Liana that I hadn't considered the audience. I replayed my own words, cringing inwardly. "I bought his underwear." "Oh God." Liana pointed a trembling finger at us, tears of rage in her eyes. "You're bullies. Both of you," she wailed before turning and stomping away. She was so blinded by fury she didn't watch her step, tripping off the curb and sprawling into the path of a slow-moving delivery bicycle. The resulting crash, howl of pain and chorus of gasps from the crowd was the final, ridiculous coda to the scene. Mortified, I covered my face with my hands and fled back to the office, the sound of mingled concern and laughter chasing me. I slumped at my desk, my head in my hands. What had I done? The answer came sooner than I expected. The office phone rang, a shrill sound in the quiet. It was the front desk. "Comrade Reed, a long-distance call for you. From your father." Dread pooled in my stomach. I took the receiver. "Elara." My father's voice crackled down the line, stern, no nonsense. "I just heard an interesting story. Something about you publicly declaring your affection and purchasing intimate apparel for Cale Lennox." "Dad, it's not what it sounds like. The Reed family," he boomed, cutting me off, "takes responsibility for its actions. You've made a public claim on a good man from a good family. For the sake of both your reputations and to honor your word, you will marry him. No arguments. This line is for official business. Don't waste state resources. Send me a telegram with the date." The dial tone hummed in my ear, a judgment. I stared at the beige receiver, utterly stunned. I had built a trap of my own making and the door had just slammed shut behind me. The dial tone was a death knell for my carefully constructed new life. I slowly replaced the receiver, the hard plastic cool against my burning palm. I had vanquished Leo Vance only to be snared by my own reckless, spectacular lie. I bought his underwear. Of all the idiotic, vivid details my panicked brain could have supplied, I became aware of a presence. Cale was leaning against the doorframe of his office, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but a faint, unsettling glint lit his gray eyes. He'd heard everything, of course. My father's voice had carried. So, he said, the single word hanging in the air between us. I couldn't meet his gaze. Comrade Lennox, I'm so sorry. That was an untenable situation. I was trying to help me, he finished, a hint of his dry humor returning. He pushed off the doorframe and walked over, pulling a chair to sit opposite my desk. The space felt suddenly intimate, charged with the absurdity of our predicament. You certainly did that. Liana Vance won't be darkening our gate again. My mother, however, is another matter. Your mother? I squeaked. Oh, she'll hear about it. By dinner time, I'd wager. The Ministry Gossip Network is more efficient than the Telegraph. He studied me, his head tilted. Your father sounded decisive. He's a military man. He thinks in terms of commitments and consequences. I finally looked up, wincing. I'll explain it to him. I'll tell everyone it was a tactical exaggeration. A deflection. Will they believe you? He asked, not unkindly. You were very convincing. The part about the underwear was a particularly inspired touch. Very specific. I buried my face in my hands again. Please don't. He was quiet for a moment. Then his voice softened, losing its edge of mockery. Elara, look at me. I lowered my hands. His expression was serious now, contemplative. Honestly, he began, I'm not a terrible prospect. A bit older, yes. But I'm healthy. I come from a stable family, you've met my father. I have a good career. I'm reasonably presentable. A faint, self-deprecating smile touched his lips. And for what it's worth, I do listen to my wife. Or I would. Hypothetically. He was offering me a way out, but it was a path that led straight into a different kind of union. My mind raced. A marriage of convenience? To Cale Lennox? It was insanity. But was it worse than the lingering shadow of Leo, the poisonous pity of my colleagues, the disappointed judgment of my father? You'd do that. Asked my voice small. Just marry me? Because of a scene I caused. I'd do it because, as your father so aptly noted, our reputations are now intertwined, he said pragmatically. And because, contrary to my earlier grumbling about drawing the short straw, I haven't found escorting you to be a hardship. He paused, then added almost too casually, and you're an excellent analyst. Tenacious. I respect that. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was something steadier, rooted in mutual regard and shared circumstance. In my past life, I'd yearned for a love that burned. It had scorched me to ashes. This respect, practicality, a hint of warmth, felt like solid ground. All right, I heard myself say, the words leaving my lips before my fear could stop them. Since it's come to this, we could get engaged. To settle the talk. Cale's teasing grin returned, but it was softer now. Funny you should mention that. My mother checked the almanac. She told me just this morning that September is an exceptionally auspicious month for weddings. The best in 3 years. She thinks engaged couples who are so obviously suited should just proceed directly. I stared at him. Your mother said that? This morning. She's annoyingly prescient, he shrugged. Or she's been scheming with your father. Either is possible. The door to the main office swung open then and a woman walked in. She was elegant, her hair in a neat chignon, wearing a well-tailored suit. She had Cale's eyes and an air of serene authority. Mrs. Lennox. She stopped short, taking in the scene. Her son sitting intimately close to me at my desk, our serious, hushed conversation. A brilliant, knowing smile illuminated her face. Oh, don't mind me, she said, already backing toward the door with her hands up in a gesture of surrender. You two carry on. I just had some paperwork for the section chief. I'll come back later. Much later. Mother, it's not, Cale began, but she was already out the door, her cheerful voice floating back. No, I'm not busy at all. Take your time. The door clicked shut. The silence she left behind was profound and deeply, utterly humiliating. This was, without contest, the second most mortifying moment of my life. Both my lives. I wished fervently for the floor to open up and swallow me whole. What cursed fate is this? I moaned, dropping my head to the desk with a soft thud. I felt a touch on my hand. Cale had reached across the desk. His fingers were warm, his grip firm. I think, he said, his voice a low rumble of suppressed laughter, you'd better just accept your fate. At this point my reputation is in tatters. If I ever want to court anyone else, it's hopeless. You'll have to take responsibility for me. I lifted my head. He was smiling, a real, open smile that transformed his severe handsomeness into something approachable, even charming. He was joking, but the undercurrent was serious. He was all in. And looking at him, the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the quiet strength in his posture, the unexpected kindness beneath the sarcasm, I felt my frantic resistance melt away. My heart gave a treacherous, hopeful flutter. All right, I whispered again, but this time it felt like a choice, not a capitulation. Since it's come to this. Our engagement was a quiet, bureaucratic affair. We signed papers at his parents' apartment, with Arthur Lennox beaming and his mother, Eleanor, fussing over tea and almond cakes. It felt more like a strategic alliance than a romance, but it was a comfortable one, built on a foundation of honesty about its origins. We married in September just as his mother's almanac had advised. It was a simple ceremony in a government hall. My father couldn't get leave, but his telegram read, "Knew you had good sense. Proud of you. Welcome to the family, Cale." It was the highest blessing he could give. Married life was surprisingly peaceful. We moved into a small, bright two-bedroom apartment provided by the ministry. It was ours. No Van Cess, no ghosts, no looming sense of dread. Cale was a considerate, if somewhat reserved, partner. He respected my space, my work. We fell into an easy rhythm, shared breakfasts, long days at the office, though we were soon reassigned to different departments to avoid conflict of interest. My performance had earned me a promotion to the regional logistics board, quiet evenings reading or listening to the radio. On weekends we had dinner at his parents' home. Eleanor Lennox was delighted with me, not as a prize for her son but as a person. She engaged me in discussions about policy, teased Cale with me as an ally, and never once mentioned underwear. It was during one of these walks home from his parents, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot, that I saw them. A gaunt figure in a wheelchair being pushed roughly by a sharp-faced woman. Leo Vance and Clara. They were emerging from the district courthouse. Clara was speaking, her voice a venomous hiss that carried on the crisp air. Not even half a man, a burden. Leo's head was bowed, a portrait of utter defeat. Clara shoved the chair over a curb with a jarring thump and stalked ahead, leaving him to struggle. My steps faltered. Cale's hand, which had been loosely holding mine, tightened slightly. He followed my gaze. I looked at them, the ruined man and the bitter woman, bound together in mutual resentment, and felt nothing. No hatred, no pity, not even curiosity. They were figures from a bad play that had finally ended. I turned my head, tightened my grip on Cale's hand, and kept walking. Whether Leo Vance lived or died no longer held any meaning for me. Later, I heard the rest of the story through the distant chatter of colleagues. Clara had indeed been having an affair, this time with a shopkeeper. Leo's parents had found out and confronted her. A violent fight ensued, resulting in Clara's miscarriage and the elder Van Cess arrest. Liana, true to her selfish nature, had cut ties and vanished. Left alone, paralyzed and despondent, his health declined severely, and he eventually passed away under tragic circumstances. When the news reached me, I was balancing my son Eli on my hip, pointing out a sparrow on our apartment windowsill. Cale was at the table reviewing a report. I heard the words, reported as a piece of minor, tragic local news. I felt a stillness settle over me. Not sorrow. Not joy. A simple, profound calm. The last echo of that old, painful song had faded into silence. I looked at Cale, then down at Eli's curious, bright eyes. The afternoon sun poured into our clean, quiet apartment, gilding the simple furniture, the books on the shelf, the small, thriving potted plant on the sill. This life, built on choice, on respect, on quiet daily effort, was good. It was real. It was mine. I was grateful with every fiber of my being to the woman I had been, the one who had suffered, died, and clawed her way back. She had saved me. 5 years. They passed not in the blurred, painful slog of my first life, but in a series of crisp, clear seasons, each one layering contentment upon stability. Our son Eli was a whirlwind of 4-year-old curiosity, with Cale's steady gray eyes and my defiant dark hair. Our apartment was filled with his laughter, wooden blocks, and the sturdy, loving chaos of a family that had chosen each other. My work at the Regional Logistics Board was demanding but fulfilling. I had earned a reputation for meticulous analysis and an almost uncanny foresight in supply chain disruptions, a gut feeling I attributed to diligence, not the memory of past shortages. Cale had risen to a senior position in strategic planning. We were a partnership in every sense. At home we navigated parenting with a quiet teamwork. Professionally, we were respected allies. Our former mentor-protégé dynamic matured into mutual reliance. The past was a closed book. The Vance family tragedy was a dark, distant folk tale, occasionally referenced in hushed tones by old neighbors but holding no power over me. I was Alara Lennox now, and the name fit like well-worn, comfortable leather. It was on a bright Saturday morning, the kind that promises a perfect afternoon, that the ghost appeared. Not Leo's specter, but one far more disarming. Cale was at a weekend briefing. Eli and I were at the city's main park by the duck pond. He was diligently crumbling a piece of bread for a cluster of impatient mallards, his small brow furrowed in concentration. I sat on a bench, a report half-read on my lap, soaking in the sun and the simple joy of his focus. "Excuse me," a woman's voice, soft and cultured, sounded beside me. "Might I share your bench?" I looked up, shielding my eyes against the sun. She was elegantly dressed in a wool suit slightly too warm for the day, her hair styled in a neat, old-fashioned wave. She was perhaps in her late 50s, with a gentle, lined face and intelligent eyes that held a curious, searching light as they looked at me. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the empty space beside me, my polite smile already in place. She sat gracefully, placing a leather satchel on her lap. She didn't speak immediately, her gaze drifting to Eli. "A fine boy," she murmured. "So focused. He has his father's bearing." A harmless, grandmotherly observation. Yet it prickled. "Thank you," I said, my tone neutral. "You are Alara Lennox, are you not? Marcus Reed's daughter." The mention of my father from a stranger put me on alert. "I am. And you are?" "Forgive me. Dr. Anya Petrova." She offered a hand which I shook. Her grip was firm, dry. "I was a colleague of your father's. A long time ago. In another department." The explanation was plausible. My father had worked with many people in many shadowy offices. But something in her demeanor, the careful way she studied my face, the weight behind her silence, felt off. This wasn't a chance meeting. "I'm sorry for your loss," she continued, her voice genuinely warm. "Marcus was a brilliant man. A good man. He spoke of you often. His little sparrow. He was so worried about your future." Her eyes drifted back to Eli, who was now giggling as a bold duck snatched bread from his fingers. "It seems his worries were unfounded. You have built a beautiful life." "Thank you," I repeated, the words tighter. "He would have been glad to see it." "Indeed." She paused, her fingers tracing the latch of her satchel. "His work. It was of the utmost importance. The kind that leaves loose ends even decades later. Threads that need to be woven back into the tapestry for the complete picture." A cold finger traced my spine. This was not social. This was professional. And it was about my father's work, the mission he never returned from. "Dr. Petrova," I said, keeping my voice low and even, "my father's work was classified. I know nothing of it. I am a logistics coordinator. My husband is in strategic planning. Our lives are quite separate from that world." Of course," she said soothingly, but her eyes held mine. "But the past has a way of intersecting with the present, doesn't it? Especially when it involves family. Your father left something. Not a material thing. Information. A pattern of contacts, a dormant network on the southern coast. It was his last project. With his disappearance, the threads were cut. But the needlepoint remains." Eli came running over then, bread bag empty, his hands damp and smelling of pond. "Mama, Ducky's all full." I welcomed the interruption, using a handkerchief to wipe his hands. Well done, my love. I stood, taking his small hand. It was a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Petrova. But we must be going. She rose as well, her movements still smooth, but I saw a flicker of urgency in her eyes. Mrs. Lennox. Please. There's a warehouse. Number 47 on the old commercial docks. Your father used it as a blind drop. A safety measure. We believe something may still be there. A journal. Microfilm. Something he couldn't transmit. It has become relevant again. We need someone to check. Someone who wouldn't be watched. Someone with a legitimate reason to be in the port logistics chain. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted to use me. My father's daughter, my current position. All as cover for an intelligence sweep. You are asking me to commit espionage, I stated flatly. I am asking you to help complete your father's final mission, she corrected gently. To bring a piece of him home. And to protect what he built. This isn't for the old department, Ilara. This is for the future he believed in. The future you are raising your son in. She played her cards masterfully. My father's memory. My son's future. The unspoken implication. If this something fell into the wrong hands, it could destabilize the careful peace we were building, the security of our lives. I have a family, I whispered, my grip on Eli's hand tightening. Which is why you are perfect. And why you are protected. A routine site survey for port capacity expansion. Your official cover is already being prepared. You will be asked by your superior tomorrow. She reached into her satchel and withdrew a small, plain envelope. This contains a diagram of Warehouse 47. The specific floorboard in the rear office. Look for a journal bound in green leather. If it is there, do not open it. Bring it to me. She pressed the envelope into my free hand. Burn this after memorizing it. She gave me a last lingering look, one filled with a strange mixture of apology and steely resolve. He would be so proud of the woman you've become, Ilara. Truly. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the stream of Saturday strollers along the path. I stood frozen, the sun feeling suddenly cold, the happy shrieks of children around me sounding distant. The envelope was a lead weight in my hand. Eli tugged at my fingers. Mama called. Go home. Yes, my love, I said, my voice automatic. We're going home. I burned the diagram in our kitchen sink that evening, watching the precise lines curl into black ash, committing the location to memory. As Dr. Petrova had predicted, my section chief called me first thing Monday. Lennox, we need a preliminary assessment of storage capacity in the old commercial dock sector. You're familiar with the area's logistics. Take a day, file a report. The trap, elegant and inescapable, was set. 2 days later, I stood before Warehouse 47. It was a decaying giant of weathered brick and rusted iron, sitting between two more active terminals like a rotten tooth. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was not my world. I dealt with numbers, manifests, forecasts. Not hidden journals, not my father's ghostly legacy. Using my official paperwork, I easily gained entry from the board custodian. The interior was a cathedral of dust and shadows, smelling of damp rot and old machine oil. My footsteps echoed as I made my way to the rear office, a glass-paned cube overlooking the vast empty floor. The diagram was exact. I moved a rusting filing cabinet with a grunt, revealing the warped floorboards beneath. The seventh board from the wall. I pried at it with the edge of my clipboard. It came up with a squeal of protesting nails. There, in the cavity beneath, wrapped in waxed cloth, was a book. Green leather worn at the edges. My father's handwriting peeked from the pages. A visceral wave of grief and terror washed over me. This was real. He had been here. He had hidden this, and then he had vanished. My fingers trembled as I lifted it. It was heavier than it looked. I didn't open it. I rewrapped it, placed it in my large, official-looking portfolio, and slid the floorboard back. I was halfway back across the cavernous main floor, the portfolio clutched to my chest like a live bomb, when a voice stopped me. Well. Fancy meeting you here, Mrs. Lennox. I turned, my blood freezing. It was Liana Vance. She leaned against a support pillar, dressed in shabby but clean factory overalls, her hair pulled back harshly. The years had been cruel, etching bitterness deeper into her face, but her eyes burned with the same avid, malicious light. She wasn't here by accident. Inspecting the facilities? She asked, her voice a sly drawl. Or picking up a little family inheritance? Time seemed to warp in the dusty cavern of Warehouse 47. The portfolio against my chest was no longer just leather and paper. It was a slab of irradiated concrete, its weight threatening to buckle my knees. Liana Vance's smile was a gash in the gloom, a relic of a past I'd thought buried. Liana, I said, my voice remarkably steady in the echoing space. The training of 2 lifetimes, one of submissive fear, one of cultivated calm, held me upright. This is a restricted government survey. What are you doing here? She pushed off the pillar and took a few steps closer, her work boots scuffing the concrete. The overalls hung loosely on her thinner frame. Life after abandoning her family hadn't been kind. Restricted. She let out a short, harsh laugh. I work here. Well, not here. At the new packaging plant down the wharf. But I have friends. People who notice things. Like a high-up ministry wife poking around a derelict dump instead of the shiny new terminals. Her eyes locked onto the portfolio. Heard a rumor, see? About this place. About things left behind from the old days. Valuable things. Thought I'd keep an eye out. For old time's sake. Her greed hadn't diminished. It had only grown more desperate, more feral. She didn't know what was in the portfolio, but she sensed its value. And she saw an opportunity, to profit or to hurt me. There's nothing here of value, I said, turning to walk away, every nerve screaming. Just outdated ledgers and rat nest. You're wasting your time. Am I? Her footsteps followed, echoing mine. See, I heard another rumor. About your daddy. Not that he was a hero. But that he was a traitor. That he ran off with secrets. That maybe he left some behind for his little girl. The lie was so grotesque it almost stole my breath. It was also a terrifyingly effective weapon. In this climate, such a whisper coming from a concerned citizen with a grudge could be devastating. It could reach Cale's office, tarnish my father's name, poison everything I'd built. I stopped and faced her. The fear crystallized into a cold, sharp rage. Be very careful what you say, Liana. Slander is a crime. And you have nothing. No proof. Just the bile you've been choking on for years. Her smile turned ugly. Maybe I don't need proof. Maybe I just need to make the right people curious. What's in the bag, Alara? A souvenir? Something to remember dear old traitor Dad by? I calculated in a heartbeat. Running would confirm guilt. Fighting her was beneath me and risky. I needed to neutralize her here and now. You want to know what's in here? I said, my voice dropping, taking on a conspiratorial tone. I tapped the portfolio. It's not from my father. It's for my husband. Market analysis. Property assessments. For the new East Side development. I took a step closer, forcing a look of disdainful pity. While you've been lurking in warehouses chasing ghosts, Liana, I've been building a future. Cale and I are buying land. We're moving up. Again. I let the word hang, a reminder of the social chasm between us. This, I hefted the portfolio, is our next step. Boring, bureaucratic, and profitable. Nothing that would interest you. I saw the flicker in her eyes, doubt mixed with the old, familiar jealousy. She wanted it to be a dramatic secret, but the mundane truth of my upward mobility was, in its own way, a more bitter pill. Now, I continued, my voice turning to ice, if you spread any of your vile rumors, I will not bother with slander charges. I will have a word with the manager of the packaging plant. I will mention your family history, the arrest of your parents for violent assault, your brother's tragic end. I will question your reliability, your stability. How long do you think you'll last there? Where will you go next? Her face paled beneath the grime. The little security she had, the meager job, was her last thread. I was threatening to cut it. You're a cold bitch, she whispered, but the fight had gone out of her voice. I'm a survivor, I corrected. And you will leave me alone. You will never speak my father's name again. If you do, I will ruin what's left of your life. Do we understand each other? She glared at me, hatred burning in her sunken eyes, but it was the hatred of the powerless. After a long, tense moment, she gave a single jerky nod, then turned and slunk away into the deeper shadows of the warehouse, disappearing through a side door. I didn't move until the sound of her footsteps faded. Then a violent shudder racked my body. I leaned against a cold iron stanchion, taking deep, gulping breaths. The confrontation had lasted minutes, but it had drained me. But there was no time for weakness. Liana was a rat, cornered and scared, but rats could still bite. And I had the journal. I had to deliver it. The meeting point was a small, independent bookbindery in a quiet lane. Dr. Petrova was there, posing as a customer examining a leather sample. When I entered, she looked up and her eyes immediately went to my portfolio. Without a word, she nodded to the shop owner, an elderly man who discreetly turned the open sign to closed, and retreated to a back room. "You have it," she stated. I handed her the portfolio. She didn't open it there, but her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she took it. "Was there any trouble?" "A ghost from the past. Handled." My voice was terse. She studied my face, reading the strain. "It will be worth it, Alara. This could prevent a great deal of trouble. Your father identified a vulnerability in our coastal monitoring. A pattern of signals, of payments, that pointed to a dormant infiltration network. He was close to uncovering it when he was compromised. This journal contains the last pieces. The names, the methods. So he wasn't lost at sea?" The question I had never dared ask my own mother, who had died believing her husband vanished in a storm. Dr. Petrova's expression was grave. "His boat was found adrift. No body. The official story was necessary. But no, we do not believe it was the sea that took him. We believe the network he was closing in on struck first." A new kind of grief, sharp and cold, lanced through me. Not an accident. Murder. For this book, which I now held in my hands. "Why now?" I asked. "Why, after all these years, is this suddenly urgent?" "Because things are stirring," she said quietly. "The players your father identified are becoming active again. New investments, strange shipments, familiar patterns re-emerging in the intercepted traffic. His work is the key to stopping it before it solidifies. You have brought him back to us, Alara. You have given his sacrifice meaning." The words were meant to comfort, to elevate. All I felt was a weary, profound dread. The past wasn't just memories, it was a live wire, and I had just grabbed hold of it. "I want no part of this," I said firmly. "My family, my son." "You have done your part," Dr. Petrova assured me, her voice softening. "More than your part. Your involvement ends here. Go home to your husband and your child. This journal will be analyzed, the network rolled up. Your father's name will be quietly cleared in the highest archives. And you," she offered a small, sad smile, "you can go back to your logistics reports and your little boy's laughter. The ghost is laid to rest." I left the bookbindery feeling hollow, scraped clean. She promised closure, but all I felt was exposure. Liana's venomous face swam before my eyes. The journal's secrets were now in someone else's hands, but the knowledge of its existence was a toxin in my own blood. When I arrived home, the apartment was filled with the ordinary, glorious noise of my present life. Eli was building an improbably tall tower of blocks, narrating an epic story to Kale, who sat on the floor with him, adding a block with solemn ceremony. The smell of the simple dinner I'd prepared earlier lingered in the air. Kale looked up as I entered. His sharp eyes missed nothing. He took in my pallor, the slight tremor I couldn't hide. He didn't ask questions. He just stood, walked over, and wrapped his arms around me. It was a simple, solid embrace, an anchor in the sudden, turbulent sea of my emotions. "Long day," he murmured into my hair. "The longest," I whispered, leaning into him, drawing strength from his quiet stability. Later, after Eli was asleep, we sat at the small kitchen table. I didn't tell him about the journal, about Dr. Petrova, about my father's true fate. That world was a burden I couldn't share, a danger I refused to bring to his doorstep. But I told him about Liana. About the encounter in the warehouse, her threats, my counter-threats. He listened, his face growing still and hard. "She won't bother you again," he said finally, his voice low and certain. "I'll make sure of it." It wasn't a violent promise, but a bureaucratic one. The kind he was expert in. A word in the right ear, a transfer to a factory in another province, a closing of doors. It was clean, effective, and utterly final. As I lay in bed that night, Kale's steady breathing beside me, I stared at the ceiling. The ghost of my father felt closer than ever, yet also finally, truly at peace. I had faced the shadow of his unfinished war and survived. I had protected my own. But as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, A new, more insidious fear took root. Dr. Petrova had said the journal contained names. What if one of those names was someone I knew? Someone in my world now? The past was a web and I had just tugged on a single hidden strand. I could only pray the whole thing wouldn't unravel around me. Months bled into a season. The sharp, metallic fear of the warehouse and the bookbindery slowly dulled, buried under the daily granite of routine. Autumn deepened, stripping the trees outside our apartment, and a new kind of chill entered the air, one of political frost, of subtle shifts in the ministries, of rumors about efficiency reviews and loyalty assessments. Cale was quieter, working later. The easy camaraderie of our dinner-table conversations became more guarded, punctuated by long silences where I knew he was turning over office politics too delicate to share. I didn't press. I had my own secrets, I could respect his. My counter-threat to Liana, backed by Cale's unseen influence, had worked. She vanished from the docks, reportedly taking a better opportunity at a manufacturing plant 3 provinces inland. The ghost was banished. Dr. Petrova and the Green Leather Journal dissolved into the silent world they belonged to. I heard nothing more. I told myself that was a good sign. The network had been rolled up, my father's legacy secured. The past was sealed. Then the knock came. It was a Tuesday evening. Rain sheeted against the windows. Eli was drawing at the table, his tongue peeking out in concentration. Cale was due home any minute. The knock was firm, polite, and utterly terrifying. 2 men stood in the hallway. They wore plain, well-cut suits and their faces were polite blanks. They showed identification from the Interior Security Directorate. My stomach turned to liquid. Mrs. Lennox? We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding a recent logistical survey you conducted. May we come in? My mind raced. This was it. The journal. Liana's rumors. They'd found a thread. Of course, I said, my voice miraculously level. I stepped back. Please come in. My son is here. I used Eli as a shield, a reminder of domestic normality. They entered, their eyes performing a swift, inventory-like sweep of our home. They declined tea. The survey of the old commercial docks, Warehouse 47, the taller one began, his notebook open. You filed a standard capacity report. Yet we have a witness statement suggesting you were observed acting furtively. That you may have removed an item not related to your survey. It had to be. She'd filed something before she left, a final, poisonous dart. A witness. I allowed a flicker of professional irritation to show. The site was practically derelict. The only person I saw was a former acquaintance, Liana Vance, who was trespassing and made some unpleasant, baseless accusations. I reported her interference to my section chief. A half-truth. I'd mentioned a disruptive individual in my verbal debrief. The second man spoke. His voice was softer, more dangerous. You are the daughter of Marcus Reed. It wasn't a question. I am. His work was of a sensitive nature. His disappearance left questions. My father was a loyal public servant lost in the line of duty. I said, the official line tripping off my tongue, hollow as a drum. I was a child. I know nothing of his work. Yet you visited a location he was known to use. The first man again. I visited a warehouse as part of a publicly sanctioned logistical survey of 20 properties, I countered, leaning forward slightly, letting my own bureaucratic armor show. The assignment came from my superior, Comrade Brenner. The reports are on file. If the directorate has concerns about certain locations, perhaps those concerns should have been communicated to the logistics board before sending a civilian analyst into the field. I was playing a dangerous game, showing spine, redirecting blame. They exchanged a glance. My heart hammered against my ribs. Eli, sensing the tension, came over and leaned against my leg. I placed a hand on his head, a gesture both protective and a display of vulnerable motherhood. The softer-voiced man's eyes lingered on Eli, then on a framed photograph on the shelf. Our wedding photo with Cale's father, Arthur Lennox, beaming between us. The power structure was visible, tangible in that image. Your husband is Cale Lennox of strategic planning, he stated. He is. A valued comrade. There was a pause, a recalculation. The unspoken words hung in the air. This is more complicated than a disgruntled dockworker's statement. The door opened then, saving me. Cale walked in, shaking rain from his coat. He froze for a fraction of a second, taking in the scene. The two security men, my pale face, Eli clinging to me. His own face closed, becoming an impassive mask of official courtesy. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice cool. "To what do we owe this visit? Is there an issue with my wife's work?" The dynamic shifted instantly. It was no longer two agents interrogating a possibly suspect daughter of a disappeared agent. It was a conversation between peers with uncomfortable domestic overlap. "Routine follow-up, Comrade Lennox," the taller one said, his tone noticeably smoother. "A minor discrepancy in a witness account related to a survey. Your wife has been most helpful in clarifying." Cale came to stand behind my chair, a solid, warm presence. His hand rested lightly on my shoulder. "Alara is meticulous in her duties. If there are discrepancies, they lie with the witness, not her report." His tone brooked no argument. It was a dismissal. The agents understood. The Lennox name, my own clean record, Cale's position. It was a wall. Pursuing this based on a vindictive statement from a woman like Liana Vance was not worth the political friction. They stood, offered stiff apologies for the intrusion, and left. The sound of the closing door echoed in the sudden silence of the apartment. I slumped forward, the adrenaline draining, leaving me weak and trembling. Eli looked up, worried. "Mama." "It's all right, my love. The men had the wrong house," I whispered, pulling him into a fierce hug. Cale waited until I'd put Eli to bed, weaving a soothing story far removed from the grim visitors. When I returned to the living room, he was standing by the window watching the rain. "Tell me," he said without turning around. So I did. Not everything. Not the journal, not Dr. Petrova. But I told him about my father's true work, the rumor of his murder, the fact that Warehouse 47 had been one of his dead drops. I told him Liana's accusation had a grain of terrible truth. I had been there for a reason tied to my father, though I framed it as a personal, foolish quest for closure. "I found nothing," I lied, my eyes steady on his back. "Just dust and rot." But she saw me looking. She knew about my father. She tried to use it. He was silent for a long time. The rain pattered against the glass. Then he turned. His face was tired, but his eyes held no condemnation, only a deep, weary understanding. "You should have told me. I was afraid. Of them." He gestured toward the door. "Of dragging this shadow into our home. Into Eli's life. I wanted it to be over." He came to me then, cupping my face in his hands. "Alara, listen to me. This is your home. Our home. My shadow is yours and yours is mine. That is the deal. You don't face ghosts alone. Not while I'm here." Tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed finally spilled over. He held me as I shook, the final fortress of my solitary resilience crumbling. I hadn't realized how heavy the silence had been until I shared its weight. "They won't be back," he said into my hair. "The matter is closed. I will make sure of it." And he did. Whether through his father's influence, his own deft maneuvering, or a quiet word with the right person in the security directorate, the file on Alara Reed Lennox and Warehouse 47 was stamped and buried. The official story held. Marcus Reed, hero lost at sea. His daughter, a loyal and effective logistics coordinator, harassed by a malcontent. True life resumed. But it was different. A barrier between Cale and me had dissolved. We had faced an external threat together, and the experience fused our partnership with a new, unspoken depth. The love I felt for him, which had begun as gratitude and respect, now burned with the fierce, protective intensity of a shared fortress. One Sunday afternoon, the first clear sky after weeks of gloom, we took Eli to the park. A different one, far from where I'd met Dr. Petrova. He ran ahead on the path, chasing pigeons. Cale and I walked hand in hand. "I've been offered a post," he said casually. "In the new Northern Development Office. It would mean moving. A smaller city but a good position. Clean air for Eli. A fresh start." I looked at him, understanding what he wasn't saying. Away from the capital, away from the old networks, the lingering ghosts, the Petrovas and their shadows. A chance to build something entirely our own, untethered from the past. "What do you think?" he asked, his gray eyes watching me, leaving the choice entirely in my hands. I looked ahead at our son, his laughter ringing in the cold, bright air. I looked at the man beside me who had chosen me, defended me, built a life with me. I thought of the woman I had been who died in despair and the woman I was now. The past was a country I had escaped. It held no more power over me. My father's war was over. My war was over. Now was the time for peace. Not just the absence of conflict but the active, deliberate building of it. I squeezed Cale's hand. I think it sounds perfect, I said. And for the first time, with the winter sun on my face and my family surrounding me, I believed with every fiber of my being that it was. The end.